afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Women's Power Hour show. Joining me today is Sara Campin, who is the founder and CEO of Nourish App. Sara, so good to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. Now, I mean, so much to ask you about the Nourish app itself, and we will get onto that. But I think what would be really great for the listeners is to find out a little bit more about you. Who is Sara? What's your background? And kind of what led you to create the Nourish app?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess first of all, just to highlight, Nourish is a mental wellness app for mothers, and I'm a mum of two. But in terms of a bit of background to me, prior to creating the Nourish app, I was a strategy consultant, very much focused on the life sciences industry. I worked as a management consultant for many years, but I was working in-house as head of research strategy for Cancer Research UK when my successful career collided smack bang with new motherhood. And all of the things that seemed to make me excel in my career seemed to make motherhood harder. And I really struggled with my mental health and well-being, not only as a new mum, but also when I returned to work and in juggling the pressures of work and mothering. And I think when I was a brand new mum, I never really identified with having a mental health issue per se. And I was hugely ashamed, I guess, of the ways I was feeling. And there was much less awareness back then around mental health in general. A lot of stigma associated. I mean, that still exists, but people didn't talk about that so much. And obviously that all added to those feelings of failure and struggle. And, you know, like so many, I was a strong, independent career woman and, you know, brought up with that message of like, chin up, get on with it.
Yes.
And so how could I be struggling, like, you know, and so I just had to get on with it. But I think the other thing is that because I was on the mild to moderate end of, you know, looking back now, of having a mental health issue, I thought that mental health meant, you know, extreme case of mental health issue. And so I almost felt like I didn't really deserve help and support and didn't reach out for it. And nobody had that conversation with me about how I could safeguard and look after my mental health as well. And so, but, you know, looking back now, I massively regret not having had that discussion, not being more open about what I was going through. And I know that and also not having the self-care tips and tools that I have now to really support me. And as I said, safeguard my mental health, because I know that I would have enjoyed that first year of motherhood much more and found more joy, also connected much better with my little one. And, you know, it impacted my relationship with my husband as well. You know, it was a difficult time for all of us. And that's not to say that, you know, I could totally fix that going back and, you know, it would have been perfect. But I know that if I had had tools that I have now to look after my mental health, to practice regular self-care, then I would have been better able to ride that inevitable roller coaster that parenting throws at us. And I did struggle again second time round. I did that time, having reflected on how hard it was the first time round, I did reach out for support. But again, I wasn't really ill enough to be kind of properly picked up by the health system. And I felt quite frustrated by the lack of one-to-one relevant tailored support that was available to me. And when I kind of ran back to work to slightly escape my kids, I ended up pouring all of my energy into my work with very little left for my kids. So 2 kids at home, I'm working pretty much full time. I hit close to burnout and ended up just being this person who I didn't recognize, you know, irritable and shouty a lot of the time. You know, relationship with my kids and my husband really hitting times of struggle. And I just thought there has to be a different way. This is not the mum that I want to be. There has to be another way. There must be a way to find more love and joy in motherhood. At that point, I was working as a independent consultant, and I took some time out of work, really decided to start investing in myself. So I started working with a coach. I'd lost my passion for my work, but also my family. And so I started working with a coach to to really try and find, what would light my fire, and at the same time, and that was the first time I started investing in my needs.
Yeah.
And really thinking about, actually, self-care is so important for mothers, so that they can, we need to take time for ourselves and look after our mental health, so that we can build these relationships, so that we can support our kids.
Yes.
And I set off on that kind of mission to find more love, joy, balance and calm in my motherhood journey, and that transformational impact that self-care had on my life, and the relationship with my kids, and the well-being of my kids, and the relationship with my husband, led me to with my passion and drive to help others do the same.
And it's such a powerful story, Sarah, and I'm sure that so many women are sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, that was me, that is me. And it's just amazing the pressure that we feel under to, just ride the wave, just keep going, and to really not stop and listen to the messages and the signals that are coming up with inside of us. It's not that the messages aren't there, we're just overwriting them, right, and just doing what we think is the right thing to do. And it is so important to check in on our health and well-being at all times. So well, of course, I'm super fantastically happy that you came through the other side, that you got the support that you needed to press on and find that thing that lit your fire. And I know that that's really about helping other mums. So we're going to have a little break now, and I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about the women that you are currently helping. Well, if you are just joining the show, we have Sara Campin in the studio. She is the founder and CEO of Nourish App, and she has been sharing her own journey around self-care, or the lack of it, maybe, as she had her children, motherhood, and the demands that, I want to say, society puts on us, but sometimes we also put on ourselves, and how we manage that. Now, as you are the CEO of Nourish, and I know that Nourish, and I'll give you an opportunity to kind of talk a bit more about what Nourish App actually is, but really you're now reaching out and helping other mothers who may be feeling the way that you felt, and really giving them a platform to find the tools that they need so that they don't necessarily go down those same roads. So just share about, when you started the app, and please explain what the app does and what it is, but when you started the app, what sort of response were you getting from mothers?
Sure. So I guess a bit more about what the app is. So currently the app is a multidisciplinary self-care toolkit and real mum expert support team in your pocket. So and I think the concept that we really wanted to build on here was that self-care is so multidisciplinary, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to self-care, and what we need in one moment is different to the next. But also we really wanted to make it relevant and relatable to mothers. So a really important part of the app is that it's compassionate and empathetic, and that tone of voice. So as mums, we really need to feel held and understood. And we know that to make progress with our mental health, having that empathy and feeling understood and validated in the emotions and struggles that we're going through is really important. So all the content on the app is, as I said, multidisciplinary. So there's mindfulness, there's yoga nidra, there's psychology insights, mantras, affirmations, all sorts of things that are all tailored to the emotions and challenges that mums face. So to create the app, and the inspiration behind the app was actually me on my mission to find more love, joy, balance and calm, and finding these amazing women who were mums themselves, who were sharing these tips and tools and bringing them all into this calm and compassionate, non-judgmental space that people could reach for in their pocket. And the response, people love the fact that it's tailored to the emotions and challenges that mums face, and that that, as I said, that compassion, that empathy really shines through all of the content on the app, but also talks to the fact that mums are busy and we don't have time for self-care. So one of our missions is very much to make self-care easy and accessible, but also acceptable and relevant to mothers. And that accessible part is about having really bite-sized content that we can dot through our day. And it doesn't have to be going to a yoga class. It doesn't have to be going on a long run. It can be little things, little moments of calm and nourishment that we dot through our day. And people love that, and people are drawn to that. But then maybe once they start using some of those bite-sized practices, they want something longer. And so then they try some of the, say, longer mindfulness practices or longer yoga nidra, and that's what they come back to day after day, and they're like, oh, somebody's just giving me permission to rest and be still and take time for myself. Because that acceptability point is really important, that permission. And I think the more that we can tell mums it's okay and it's necessary and it's critical that they do rest and take time for themselves, so the more we can advocate that, the more we're doing our job and achieving our mission, but we're also giving them the tools to enable that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and that's just so true, isn't it? I think that quite often in the conversations I've had, it's almost like, I know self-care is important, but I haven't got an hour. But the self-care isn't an hour. It's about, as you have said, creating those bite-sized moments where you can literally catch your breath and just get back to self, and if that's 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes. 5 minutes is better than none at all, right? But
or two,
even two. Listen, whatever you can do, and dot those through your days. And I do think that self-care is one of those things, the more you get into the practice of it, the more you will start to just create more pockets of time for it, because you'll start to feel the benefits, which ultimately is what it's all about. So it's great. So here's an app where you can go and access across all the disciplinaries and find things also that suit you, because not everything is for everyone, right? So really kind of create their own little program of things that they enjoy doing.
Exactly. So you can create your own personal self-care toolkit that you can then reach for and say, these are the things that I know are going to sort me out in this moment where your son is throwing a tantrum on the floor and you just need a couple of minutes time out, or you just had an argument, or you just had a stressful day at work and you need to de-stress afterwards, that you found the things that are going to exactly top you up.
Yeah, wonderful, excellent. Okay, so let's have another little break and then we'll be back to continue. Well, we are back. Sarah is still with us. We're talking very much about Sarah's amazing app, which is the Nourish app, really built for mothers to help them, I want to say, flourish and really have time and know how to create pockets of time for themselves during their day to look after their well-being. And I guess, Sarah, you really started off with a very strong story about your own experience and the impact of that. And so I just want to ask you, where is your self-care now? I mean, you're still a mum, you still have 2 children, you still have a business and everything else. So how are you ensuring that your self-care, in the midst of helping a lot of other people as well, is still showing up and working for you?
So it's hard. Like, self-care is really hard. And that's, why I'm so passionate about it. And we wanted to create the app to really empower mothers and make it easier. Because we are all busy. We all have constant demands from our kids, from our work. And sometimes, like anything, like, you can easily fall off the wagon and it can feel very hard to get back on it. But I think, the thing that we talked about time earlier being one of those biggest barriers, and kind of having the bite-sized content that you can dip through your day. The other big barrier that we touched on, but didn't go into detail, is that permission.
Yes.
And the guilt associated with taking time for ourselves. And actually, when we reframe that and say self-care isn't selfish, it is essential for me to show up as my best self, to enable me to show up more often as my best self, as the mum I want to be, as the colleague I want to be. It is far from selfish. And sometimes we need to reframe that as, it's not necessarily me first, it's me as well. But just remembering, I mean, everyone has heard the analogy of putting on your own mask first before putting your kids on in an airplane, but it's so true. We cannot pour from an empty cup, and that is what drives me every day to make time for myself. It is knowing that if I have done my 10 minutes mindfulness, it might only be 10 minutes in the morning, then I am going to be able to get through the school run in a much calmer place. And that's not to say that I always manage it completely calm, because I think that's one of the most important points of self-care, is understanding that we are all only human.
Yes.
And we all only have finite resources to cope. And even if we practice these tools, it's about practicing the self-compassion that comes with it. But I know that also, getting outside for me is essential every day. I make that a priority. I know that I have to get outside, whatever the weather, even if it's a short walk to the shop. So I make time for mindfulness. I make time for getting outside, whether that's a walk or a jog, into nature if possible, into headspace if possible. So I live in London. I'm lucky enough to live quite close to the river. Being able to get to that spaciousness, physical space, is really important for me. And then there's other things that I dot through my day, like as we said earlier, it might just be, rather than going to a yoga class, which I do love as well, but I just don't have to. Definitely in the last year, I've not been to a yoga class. And I haven't even managed to do 15 minutes of yoga in my front room. I haven't managed that. But what I have managed to do is, when I put the kettle on, doing a yoga pose, to just keep that movement. Sitting at my desk, I can do some yoga poses. So it's these, as I said before, it's these little things that can dot through my day. But the first thing is that permission. The second thing is the making it bite-sized, and then keeping that compassion for myself when things don't work out, when I don't manage to achieve all the self-care that I've wanted, or I don't show up as the mother that I want to show up as. I continue to find that compassionate voice with myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that compassionate voice is so important, as opposed to the guilt and I'm not enough, and and how awful of me not to have dropped a plate. It's like, we are human beings. And you touched on the whole thing about it not self-care not being selfish, that there is nothing selfish about it. But the other thing that sometimes comes up, and certainly that I have heard, is self-care, it's just all a bit woo-woo, it's all a bit fluffy. How do we dispel that notion?
So I definitely used to think that like mindfulness and yoga were a bit too woo-woo for me. But I think, like, opening my mind to those practices in, as I said, like a bite-sized modern way. It doesn't need to be going on a full day silent retreat in a monastery. It can just be taking those moments through your day and thinking, what is going to nourish me in this moment? And maybe, just as you said earlier, finding a practice that resonates for you. What does nourish you? Is that going for a jog? Really questioning yourself, is this nourishing, or am I pushing myself too hard? Because I think sometimes we can confuse that, and by like really pushing ourselves in the gym and saying we're supporting our mind and body, and we might be supporting our mind, but actually we're depleting ourselves as well. And if we've got lots of other things going on, I'm a big advocate for exercise, but I know that I've pushed myself too hard in the past, and actually really thinking, what do I need right now? Is it just a mindful walk in nature? Or can I try mindfulness? If I didn't like it in that, I didn't like that meditation, could I try a different form of meditation? Maybe a different voice would work for me. I tried mindfulness a few times, didn't really click with it, and then tried a different app prior to Nourish. And again, it was like maybe a 5-minute meditation that got me started.
Yeah.
And actually mindfulness has been the gateway for me for a lot of that self-compassion, for just understanding that self-awareness. And so I'm a big advocate for it. But it can just start with, as you said earlier, taking those moments of calm in your day to just pause and breathe. Like breathing, a breathing practice is actually a mindfulness practice, really, because you're just focusing your mind on your breathing. And so let's not call it something that maybe you've got a hang up with, that people maybe are like, oh, this is too woo-woo. Call it what you like.
Yes.
But take that time for yourself to be in the moment, where you can let go of the worries, you can let go of the ruminating on the past, and just be. And if that's doing woodwork or you know, going for a swim or whatever it is, to bring yourself into that present moment, to just give your mind a break, then it can be anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some of it is like just unpacking. You don't immediately have to brain relate it to, you know, going and having your nails done or doing anything very specific. It's what does it mean for you? And I think even in the workplace, sometimes that can be just making sure you have your lunch breaks and you eat, you know, that you put some goodness into your body so that you can be focused and ready for the next part of the day. I mean, there are having healthy boundaries. All of those things are part of self-care. It's such a broad thing.
Yeah, and I think that it is really broad. And I think the thing is, as you say, like, it's not even just the woo-woo side, it's that pampering side, the indulgent side, which has given it a bad name. It doesn't necessarily, actually, a lot of self-care doesn't feel it is indulgent because you're taking time to look after you, but actually it's the hardest thing, it's the hardest choice over, you know. But that's not to say I'm not an advocate for getting your nails done and taking those moments of indulgence, but it's not just that, it's much more than that. And and taking that time, just prioritizing you, it can mean a whole spectrum of different things. But think about, like, is this helping future me? I think that's a really good kind of question to ask yourself. And so scrolling through, you know, I love Netflix too, so I'm not going to say that like sitting on the sofa with some Netflix isn't great self-care, but is watching the 4th, 5th episode of whatever it is really self-care, or actually is that going to impact your sleep? And then, you know, so just questioning what is really going to nourish my mind and body and soul. You know, it's self-care is about really nourishing all of those three.
The whole self. And I think you're quite right. I think we just need to be, curious, when I'm doing this, what am I really getting from it, as to what we have told ourselves we are getting from it. And I think that also helps.
And what do we really need? Coming back to that question.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Okay, Sarah, I'm going to have one more break. When we come back, I'm going to give you the opportunity to let the listeners know how they can find you, your app, and all the great stuff that you're doing. So we are back, and Sara has continued this fantastic conversation around self-care, the Nourish app, and really just remembering those. I think some of the key things that you said, Sara, were, knowing that it's okay to have bite-sized moments through the day and giving yourself permission and being able to do it guilt-free. So, I mean, there is, at this point, there's nothing to feel guilty about. And I think if we circle back to where you started in sharing your own story, what we know for certain is if we do not prioritize our self-care, the impact it has on our mental, physical, and emotional and spiritual well-being, is probably not the places we want to go. And why go to burnout and experience the worst things before you actually understand that, when you can find resources that will help you in the here and now. So with that said, Sara, please share away about Nourish App and all the good stuff that you're doing so that our listeners can get some of that for themselves.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. Yeah, so you can find us on our website, www.thenourishapp.com. Search for us on the App Store or Play Store, the Nourish App. You can download the app for free and access all of the content initially, and then you can upgrade to a premium subscription, very low cost currently. But you can always access the free version, which gives you access to 10 meditations and videos, as well as over 150 quick reads of wellness tools. And you can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at the Nourish App.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Well, Sara, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely brilliant. And thank you for being so open and really sharing that story, because I think the more women hear the stories, they can stop feeling isolated and stop feeling like this is something not to be spoken about, because it is absolutely something to be spoken about, and absolutely to reach out for help and support. I think that that's so important. And I think your story has really demonstrated the importance of that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.